There is a tree growing in a cracked driveway in Phoenix, Arizona right now. No sprinklers, no drip line. The asphalt is buckling from 115-degree heat. And the tree is green. Bright green. It contains every vitamin the human body needs to survive. All 20. Vitamin A, C, D, E, K. Every B vitamin. Calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, zinc. A complete protein profile with all 9 essential amino acids. 7 times the vitamin C of an orange. 4 times the calcium of milk. 3 times the potassium of a banana in one plant. 0 irrigation, 0 fertilizer, 0 pesticides. For over 4,000 years, it fed civilizations across 3 continents. Colonial botanists documented it in 1817. The World Health Organization has cited it in climate adaptation strategies. And yet, if you search the major food security programs of the United Nations, the World Bank, or USAID, you will not find a single large-scale initiative to distribute it. Then it vanished. Not from the earth, from the policy, documents, from the funding proposals, not because it failed, because it solved too many problems without a purchase order, because it grows in deserts where soybeans die, because it survives droughts that kill corn, because it produces a complete multivitamin without a lab, a patent, or a prescription. This is the story of a tree that breaks every rule of modern agriculture, and the institutions that spent 50 years pretending it doesn't exist. If you've ever stood in a grocery store staring at $8 organic greens that wilt in 3 days, this will make sense. If you've watched your water bill climb every summer just to keep a tomato plant alive, this will hurt. If you're tired of buying supplements that promise everything and deliver a monthly subscription, what I'm about to show you will make you angry. Because the solution has been growing in backyards, refugee camps, and forgotten corners of the tropics this entire time. The story begins in northern India. Around 2000 BCE, a Sanskrit text describes a tree called Shigru, the one that pierces like an arrow. Ancient physicians documented its use in treating over 300 diseases. They didn't call it a superfood, they called it survival. The tree is Moringa oleifera. Welcome to Forgotten Nature Vault, where we dig up the living systems modern life taught you to forget. By the 1st century CE, Arab traders carried moringa down ancient spice routes into East Africa. It spread to the Philippines, the Caribbean, every tropical region where people needed food that could survive when the rains failed. In 1817, British colonial botanists documented it in official reports. They noted its drought tolerance, they measured its nutritional density. But here's what those reports didn't say. They didn't say it was rare, they said it was common. It grew in villages, along roadsides, in places where nothing else would. And that was the problem. Because moringa wasn't just nutritious, it was fast. Plant a seed and within 60 days you can harvest the first leaves. Within a year the tree grows 3 to 5 meters tall. You can cut it back and it regrows. You can harvest it 6 times a year without killing it. You don't need to replant. You don't need to buy new seeds every season. In the Philippines, families called it malunggay. In East Africa, morongo. In India, drumstick tree. Different names, same function. A tree that required almost nothing and gave almost everything. And then in the mid-20th century, the development agencies arrived with a very specific vision of what modern agriculture should look like. And moringa was not part of it. The turning point came in the 1960s and 1970s. The Green Revolution swept across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The architects were the Rockefeller Foundation, USAID, the World Bank, and the FAO. They funded research stations. They distributed seeds. And they chose which crops would define the future of food. Hybrid maize, high-yield wheat, miracle rice, crops that could produce massive yields under one condition. You had to buy the package. The seeds, the fertilizer, the pesticides, the irrigation systems. It was a system designed for dependency. By 1974, when the World Food Conference convened in Rome, the Green Revolution was being hailed as a triumph. Moringa was not mentioned, not once. Here's why. Follow the incentives. Moringa is a perennial tree. You plant it once. It produces for 20 years. You don't need to buy seeds every season. It fixes nitrogen in the soil, so you don't need fertilizer. It has natural pest resistance, so you don't need pesticides. It survives on 250 millimeters of rainfall per year. It grows in degraded soil where other crops fail. Now compare that to the Green Revolution model. Hybrid maize requires annual seed purchases. It requires 100 to 200 kilograms of nitrogen fertilizer, per hectare. It requires pesticides. It requires 500 to 800 millimeters of water. But if you're Cargill, if you're Monsanto, if you're Yara, that's not a problem. That's a business model. Between 1970 and 2000, the global fertilizer industry grew into a $60 billion market. The pesticide industry grew to over $70 billion. Seed companies built empires on patented hybrids. Moringa couldn't be patented. It's an ancient landrace. It belongs to the public domain. Every advantage that made Moringa valuable to a subsistence farmer made it worthless to a multinational corporation. So the research money went elsewhere. Between 1970 and 2000, there were fewer than 15 peer-reviewed agronomic studies on Moringa. In the same period, there were over 10,000 studies on hybrid maize. The FAO published priority crop lists throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Moringa never appeared. But the suppression wasn't just about neglect. It was about language. In development reports, Moringa was labeled a famine food, a poor man's vegetable. The implication was clear. This is what you eat when you have no other options. And the consequences were brutal. In the 1990s, UNICEF distributed millions of vitamin A supplements to children in India, Kenya, and the Philippines, countries where Moringa trees were already growing. The supplements cost money. They required cold chain logistics. Meanwhile, the tree that contained more vitamin A than a carrot, more iron than spinach, and more protein than an egg was growing in people's yards. Ignored. The soil degradation was worse. Monoculture maize exhausts the soil. Moringa fixes nitrogen. It prevents erosion. Its deep taproot, up to 3 meters, breaks up compacted soil and brings nutrients to the surface. But improving the land without a purchase order doesn't generate revenue for the companies writing the development plans. Then there's the water crisis. Moringa seeds contain a natural coagulant. When crushed and added to turbid water, they bind to bacteria and sediment. Studies in the 1970s showed that Moringa seeds could remove 90 to 99% of bacteria from contaminated water. The technology was documented, it was tested, it worked, and it was never scaled by the WHO or UNICEF. Instead, they promoted chlorine tablets and ceramic filters, products that had to be manufactured, shipped, and sold. By the early 2000s, an entire generation had grown up without knowing what their grandparents knew. The cultural amnesia was complete. The tree was still there, but the knowledge of why it mattered had been severed. And this is where it gets darker. Development aid often works through loans. African and Asian nations borrow money from the World Bank to subsidize fertilizers and improved seeds. The loans create dependency. The debt creates leverage. A crop that requires no inputs generates no debt. And a crop that generates no debt generates no control. Moringa oleifera is food sovereignty in its purest form. It allows a community to produce complete nutrition, improve their soil, purify their water, and store food for years without writing a check to buyer, without taking a loan from the World Bank, and without purchasing nitrogen from Yara. That's not a bug in the system. That's the threat. Right now, someone is paying $40 for a month's supply of multivitamins made in a lab. Right now, a development agency is shipping fortified food packets to a region where this tree already grows. Right now, a farmer is being trained to buy fertilizer for a crop that will fail in the next drought. And this tree just keeps growing. Subscribe if you want to know what else they left out. Send this to one person who's done paying for solutions that nature already solved. So why is Moringa still sidelined? Because the system wasn't built to support it. Start with insurance and liability. NGOs operate under legal frameworks that make them risk-averse. Promoting a traditional food that isn't part of the official agricultural canon opens them up to liability questions. Never mind that Moringa has been consumed safely for 4,000 years. Without a modern clinical trial, published in a Western journal, it's considered unproven. Then there are the subsidies. In the United States and Europe, agricultural subsidies overwhelmingly favor soy, corn, wheat, and rice. Billions of dollars flow annually. There is no subsidy for Moringa, no crop insurance, no price supports. If you're a farmer in Arizona, you can get federal assistance to grow alfalfa in the desert, a crop that requires massive irrigation. But if you want to grow Moringa, a tree that thrives in heat and needs almost no water, you're on your own. The infrastructure isn't there either. There are no Moringa processing plants at scale. No commodity exchanges, no futures market. Moringa doesn't fit that model. But here's what's changing. In 2014, a study published in the Journal of Food Science and Technology found Moringa leaf powder contained 25% protein with a complete amino acid profile. In 2018, the World Health Organization cited Moringa as a climate-resilient crop. The report acknowledged its drought tolerance, its nutritional density, and its potential to address malnutrition. But no funding programs were launched. It was acknowledgement without action. In 2020, the USDA published growing guidelines for Moringa in the United States. The tree thrives in zones 9 through 11, Southern California, Arizona, Texas, Florida. It can survive on as little as 250 millimeters of annual rainfall. It tolerates temperatures up to 48 degrees Celsius. In a region facing megadrought, Moringa is one of the few crops that make sense. And yet it's still considered exotic. But people are planting it anyway. In Phoenix, in Tucson, in Las Vegas, Moringa trees are appearing in front yards, in community gardens, in urban farms. Not because of a government program, because someone learned what it could do and decided to try. Here's how you grow it. If you're in a warm climate, plant the seeds directly in the ground in spring. The seeds germinate in 7 to 14 days. Within 2 months, you can start harvesting leaves. Cut the branches back to encourage bushier growth. You can harvest every 2 to 3 months. In the first year, the tree will grow 3 to 5 meters tall. After that, it's a perennial. If you're sourcing seeds, avoid the multi-level marketing brands. Go to nonprofits like Trees for Life or the Moringa Initiative. Use the fresh leaves like spinach, in soups, stir-fries, omelets. Use the dried powder in smoothies, about 1 to 2 teaspoons per day. The pods, when young and green, can be cooked like green beans. Moringa thrives in places other crops can't. Degraded soil, urban heat islands, driveways, anywhere with full sun and decent drainage. It just grows. We are living through the convergence of 3 crises: drought, malnutrition, water scarcity. And the institutions tasked with solving them keep funding crops that make all 3 worse. Moringa oleifera addresses all 3. It survives drought, it delivers complete nutrition, it purifies water, and it does. All of this without asking for anything except sun and time. It feeds without fertilizer, it survives without rain. It asks nothing but a seed and soil. There's a moringa tree growing in a refugee camp in northern Kenya right now. It was planted 5 years ago by a grandmother who remembered it from her childhood in Somalia. She didn't wait for a development agency. She didn't wait for a grant. She saved the seeds, planted them, and taught the children how to harvest the leaves. They eat them in stews. They dry them for storage. They share the seeds with other families. There's no UN logo on that tree, no corporate sponsor, no press release. Just a woman who refused to forget what her grandmother taught her. That's how this survives. Not through policy, not through funding. Through people who understand that the most radical act in a system built on dependency is remembering how to feed yourself. This is Forgotten Nature Vault. Send this to one person who would actually use it.